Ford is facing a new crisis as its stock tumbles to the lowest point in a year, hitting $7.89 earlier today.
Ford's former employee exposed a scam that brought the American giant to its knees. For years, Ford approved trucks that engineers warned were unsafe. Internal emails were edited, reports erased, failures dismissed. The scam wasn't an accident, it was a strategy. And the consequences reach far beyond dealerships. This scandal affects resale values, safety ratings, and the trust every driver places in the vehicles they buy. Who ordered this cover-up at the top? Why were so many warnings ignored? And how many families were put in danger without knowing? The whistleblower who blew the lid off Ford's hidden scam. The former employee, a mid-level engineering lead who spent more than a decade inside Ford's truck division, stepped forward with allegations so explosive they ripped through the industry. According to him, Ford's leadership knowingly pushed defective trucks into production trucks that failed stress tests, trucks with electrical faults, trucks that engineers begged management to halt. He claimed managers rewrote safety reports, altered inspection logs, and ordered entire teams to adjust their findings so quarterly revenue targets would not take a hit. When he refused to sign off on a batch of F-Series trucks with structural inconsistencies, he said he was removed from the project and threatened with reassignment. The whistleblower described a corporate environment where truth was treated as a threat, and engineers were expected to stay quiet or be replaced. "We were told the trucks would survive the market long enough," he said. "Fixes could come later. Profits could not wait." His testimony shattered Ford's image overnight. The brand that sold itself as built tough was now accused of being built on concealment. And what he revealed next was worse because it exposed the defect Ford hoped no driver would ever discover. The hidden truck defect Ford tried to erase. This was not a minor issue. It was the defect that could topple an empire. The whistleblower identified an internal code name for the failure and electrical stability flaw baked into thousands of F-Series trucks. Under heavy load, the trucks could experience sudden power loss, unpredictable steering assistance disconnects, or complete electronic shutdowns. Engineers flagged it repeatedly. Management buried it repeatedly. He claimed internal documents showed executives overruling safety teams to avoid delays that would cost billions. Some emails allegedly instructed staff to describe malfunction data as non-critical variants. Others removed entire tables of failure cycles. The whistleblower said he watched colleagues lose their positions after raising concerns about the defect. And because Ford refused to slow production, those trucks hit the streets. Customers believed they were buying the safest, strongest truck in America. Instead, they were buying a product that insiders feared could fail without warning. When the first failures appeared, vehicles losing power during towing, dashboards going dark at highway speeds, Ford denied patterns existed. But after the whistleblower released his files, the truth erupted. The defect was real, the cover-up was real, and Ford could not contain it anymore. The scandal exploded publicly, and the recalls that followed were the breaking point. Before we go deeper, take a second to like this video, subscribe for more breaking investigations, and share your thoughts below. Your engagement helps push stories like this into the spotlight and ensures these revelations reach the viewers who need to hear them. The recall explosion that exposed the truth Ford feared most. When nearly 400,000 vehicles are recalled in weeks, it is not maintenance. It is a meltdown. After the whistleblower's revelations went public, Ford was forced to trigger one recall after another. Hybrid escapes with overheating batteries, Nautilus models with failing safety sensors, diesel trucks with fuel pumps that could seize at full speed, and the F-Series trucks, the heart of Ford's empire, flagged for electrical failures that echoed the whistleblower's warnings. Dealerships descended into chaos. Sales reps confessed that entire shipments were being pulled back before they even hit the floor. Customers walked in excited and walked out terrified. Some dealers said their lots looked like storage yards for broken promises, dusty, unsellable trucks waiting for parts Ford could not deliver. The recall avalanche exposed what Ford tried desperately to hide. The defect was systemic, not isolated. It was not one bad part. It was a chain reaction created by a company that ignored its own engineers. Consumers now saw Ford as unstable. The media called it a crisis of confidence. Analysts called it a collapse in slow motion, but Wall Street saw something even more destructive because the scandal turned Ford from an American icon into a financial liability overnight. The market meltdown that proved Ford had lost control. Ford did not just lose customers, it lost its future. Immediately after the truck scandal erupted, investors dumped Ford stock at a rate not seen in decades. Analysts who once defended the company now warned that Ford's leadership had allowed a safety crisis to grow into a structural failure. Shares fell sharply, and guidance revisions wiped billions off Ford's value in days. Financial networks highlighted the contrast. While the broader market soared, Ford plunged. Jim Cramer declared the company a disappointment, and institutional investors agreed. They did not trust the numbers anymore. They did not trust the leadership anymore. The whistleblower's evidence made it clear that Ford's internal reporting could no longer be believed. When Wall Street loses trust, the collapse is immediate. Pension funds reduced exposure. Hedge funds exited completely. Analysts called Ford unpredictable, opaque, and high-risk 3 labels that kill confidence instantly. Ford's downfall was no longer a story about a defect. It was a story about a company that sacrificed honesty, safety, and transparency until the system finally snapped. And as bad as the financial crisis was, something even bigger was coming because regulators were about to open investigations that would push Ford to the edge of survival. Inside Ford's culture of concealment, this was not a slip-up. It was a system. Inside Ford's corporate walls, employees described an unspoken rule that nothing, absolutely nothing, could slow down production. Teams tasked with reviewing truck components were often pressured to sign off on parts even when clear inconsistencies surfaced. Engineers who flagged electrical irregularities or frame tolerances outside approved ranges said they were quietly pushed aside. The message was unmistakable: do not question momentum. Analysts had spent years warning that Ford's biggest weakness was not the cars themselves, but the company's chronic reluctance to be transparent. They pointed to abrupt factory halts, confusing guidance statements, and unexplained delays that Ford rarely clarified. Instead of addressing concerns openly, the company absorbed losses in silence, hoping no one would notice. That approach filtered down through every department. Test data that revealed risks frequently disappeared. Reports that should have triggered immediate investigation were rewritten, softened, or buried. In meeting rooms, when engineers raised concerns, executives responded with directives to stay focused, a phrase employees came to interpret as a dismissal. This culture of concealment allowed small issues to metastasize into structural failures. By the time the whistleblower stepped forward, the rot inside Ford's decision-making machinery was too extensive to hide. The deception was not isolated, it was institutional. And the cost of that culture showed up where it hurt most: the warranty bill, the warranty time bomb. Ford was not fixing problems, it was paying for them. As the hidden quality failures accumulated, the financial consequences detonated with brutal force. Warranty costs surged far beyond historical averages, consuming resources that should have been reinvested into innovation and repair. Ford's own financial statements showed that warranty expenses had more than doubled compared to earlier decades, rising from long-term norms to unprecedented levels after the year 2022. In the second quarter of the year 2024 alone, Ford faced an $800 million spike in warranty charges. Total quarterly costs climbed to between $1.5 and $2 billion, a staggering financial weight that rattled investors and confirmed internal mismanagement. These were not ordinary fluctuations in repair spending. They were the direct fallout from leadership decisions that prioritized production numbers over engineering integrity. Every concealed defect in the trucks became a future liability. Every suppressed test result transformed into a claim Ford could not avoid. Analysts noted that warranty accruals repeatedly exceeded cash outflows, a sign that underlying issues were worsening faster than Ford could repair them. Executives attempted to convince shareholders the surge was temporary, but the numbers told a different story. This was not a one-time correction. It was a compounding crisis born from years of ignored warnings, buried data, and pressure to keep defective trucks on the line. But if warranty costs were bad, the electric vehicle division made the crisis look small. The EV disaster that should have been Ford's future. Ford did not just fall behind in the electric vehicle race, its strategy collapsed on impact. While competitors introduced wave after wave of new electric models, Ford remained stuck, with a sparse lineup that failed to excite consumers. The Mustang electric sport utility vehicle held its ground, but nearly every other electric model struggled. Demand for the F-150 Lightning dropped sharply, with monthly sales falling by double-digit percentages year over year. Financially, the electric division became a black hole. In the year 2024, Ford's electric and software arm lost more than $5 billion. The previous year brought losses nearly as severe. Instead of gaining momentum, Ford's electric program became a symbol of delay, indecision, and poor planning. Meanwhile, General Motors accelerated forward with dedicated electric platforms, and Tesla continued expanding its lead. China's aggressively subsidized electric export market further undercut Ford's position, flooding global markets with lower-cost options. Ford's cancellations of planned multi-row electric sport utility vehicles, paired with production slowdowns, shocked analysts who expected the company to compete seriously. The misread of emerging consumer priorities, combined with the lack of a coherent battery strategy, ensured Ford's electric offerings arrived late, limited, and uncompetitive. The electric vehicle space should have been Ford's rebirth. Instead, it became the clearest evidence that leadership had no unified vision for the future. Ford could not win the future, and it could not manage the present. The inventory, glut that dealers couldn't hide. A car company dies when its lots stop moving. Across the United States, Ford dealerships found themselves drowning in inventory that no one wanted. The average supply sat at 96 days, far beyond the roughly 60-day industry benchmark that indicates a balanced market. Rows of new trucks and sport utility vehicles remained untouched for months, collecting dust, while sales teams scrambled to offer incentives that cut deeper into already fragile margins. Dealers whispered about bloated stock numbers and slow-moving models, especially those tied to the defect scandal. Customers who once considered Ford a default choice now hesitated, fearful of recalls and reliability concerns. Even Ford's most iconic models, including the F-Series trucks, faced extended overhangs that signaled collapsing demand relative to supply. The unsold units created a financial choke point. Storing them cost money. Discounting them cost even more. Analysts from major firms warned that Ford's inventory mismanagement reflected deeper forecasting failures. Instead of aligning production with real-world demand, Ford had flooded dealers with vehicles it could not sell, locking up capital and intensifying losses. Some dealerships described the situation as the worst imbalance they had experienced in decades. The glut became a visible representation of Ford's internal failures, trucks sitting still while competitors' lots emptied. And while dealers struggled to survive, Ford's global operations were burning cash in silence. Ford's global miscalculations. Ford did not just fail at home, it failed everywhere. Across India, Brazil, and Europe, the company repeated the same strategic missteps that undermined its standing in the United States. In India, Ford pushed oversized, fuel-hungry vehicles into a market where drivers prioritized efficiency and affordability. Customers described test drives where basic controls felt foreign, and the company stubbornly refused to adapt its designs. What should have been a gateway into one of the world's largest automotive markets became a slow-motion embarrassment that ended with Ford withdrawing entirely in the year 2021. Brazil proved just as costly. Ford invested more than 11 billion reais into manufacturing facilities, only to abandon the market after years of declining relevance. The retreat left factories shuttered, communities disrupted, and billions lost that could have stabilized Ford's deteriorating financial position back home. Europe brought a different kind of failure. As electric adoption surged across the continent, Ford found itself overextended and underprepared. The company announced layoffs, affecting roughly 14% of its European workforce, citing slumping demand and eroding margins. Each decision chipped away at Ford's credibility as a global competitor. These international retreats did not simply bruise Ford's pride, they drained the resources needed to confront its growing truck crisis. Money poured into corrections abroad could have addressed problems that were metastasizing at home, but the world was watching, and political leaders were about to respond. If you want to stay ahead of the next major industry shakeup, make sure you subscribe right now. New updates are coming, and you will want to hear them first. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss what happens next. When Washington came knocking. A truck safety scandal becomes a political weapon fast, as reports of defects, engine fires, battery failures, and sudden malfunctions circulated nationwide. Washington officials sharpened their focus on Ford's internal practices. Regulators opened inquiries into a pattern of accelerated failures across multiple truck generations, demanding documentation that Ford had struggled to keep hidden. Lawmakers seized the moment. Some framed Ford's troubles as evidence of long-standing corporate negligence. Others used the crisis to argue for tighter automotive safety standards, calling attention to past Ford disasters such as the Pinto explosions and the Explorer rollovers. Old wounds reopened, reminding the public that Ford's safety controversies were not isolated, but part of a recurring pattern stretching across decades. Committees requested testimonies from executives, engineers, and suppliers. Questions turned sharp. Why were defects ignored? Why were warnings silenced? And how deeply did management know about the risks customers were facing? The political pressure grew heavier as consumer fear intensified, and national news networks replayed images of smoking engines and malfunctioning systems. Ford's leadership attempted to project confidence. But regulators were not satisfied with reassurances. They wanted evidence, accountability, and structural change. With every passing week, the company looked less like a historic American manufacturer and more like a corporation dodging responsibility while trucks failed on the road. And as regulators circled Ford, workers turned against the company too. Workers fight back. When workers lose faith, the company loses everything. Inside Ford's plants, frustration that once simmered quietly began to erupt into open resistance. Employees who had witnessed warnings being ignored now demanded accountability from leadership. They recalled moments when safety concerns were brushed aside and when production quotas outweighed engineering judgment. The whistleblowers' revelations confirmed what many feared. Their voices had never mattered to those in charge. Union leaders amplified the outrage. They criticized management for failing to protect employees' reputations and for placing them in the impossible position of building vehicles they no longer trusted. Rumors of potential plant shutdowns spread anxiety through the workforce, especially among longtime employees who feared losing livelihoods built over decades. Meetings that once focused on efficiency shifted toward discussions of transparency, worker rights, and demands for meaningful reforms. The internal rebellion gained strength as more employees shared stories of defects they had noticed, tests they believed were manipulated, and decisions that prioritized cost savings over human safety. Each account widened the gap between management and labor. Employees who once celebrated their association with Ford now felt complicit in a system that misled customers and endangered families. The company attempted to regain control, but the tide had turned. Distrust inside the factories mirrored the distrust outside them, deepening the crisis. But the final blow did not come from workers or investors. It came from customers. The day American drivers walked away from Ford. A scandal becomes fatal only when the public believes it. For decades, Ford enjoyed a place in American identity that few companies could match. Families passed down F-Series trucks from parent to child, trusting the brand as a symbol of reliability. But trust is fragile, and once broken, it rarely returns. As the defect scandal spread, customers began fleeing to competitors such as General Motors, Toyota, and Tesla. Surveys showed confidence in Ford, collapsing at a pace analysts described as unprecedented. Drivers who once swore by Ford now said safety mattered more than loyalty. Dealerships reported conversations with buyers who walked onto the lot, ready to purchase, and walked off moments later after learning about the latest recall. Emotionally, the betrayal ran deep. People felt misled by a company that claimed toughness while hiding vulnerabilities. Some customers described the experience as losing a piece of their identity, a symbol that no longer represented strength, but uncertainty. Trucks that once carried families across states now carried doubts about whether the company behind them still valued those families at all. The social shift was unmistakable. Ford's brand, once woven into American culture, was now overshadowed by fear, frustration, and disappointment. Customers were not simply choosing alternatives, they were abandoning a legacy they no longer trusted. And that is when the ripple effects spread far beyond Ford. How the scandal redefined the auto industry. Ford's collapse became every automaker's warning sign. What happened inside Ford did not stay inside Ford. Across the United States, manufacturers began reassessing their quality control systems with a level of urgency not seen in decades. Competitors who once viewed recalls as routine inconveniences now treated them as existential threats. Companies instituted deeper audit cycles, expanded engineering oversight, and introduced cross-departmental review teams designed to prevent the kind of concealment that had brought Ford to its knees. Electric vehicle strategies also shifted. After witnessing Ford's narrow lineup and multi-billion-dollar losses, automakers recognized that the future required more than bold marketing and rushed releases. They stepped back to evaluate platform design, battery sourcing, and software architecture, realizing that an incomplete electric roadmap could be as dangerous as an unsafe truck. The lesson was clear. The market would no longer forgive technical shortcuts or strategic improvisation. Even supply chains changed. Parts suppliers tightened documentation protocols, and manufacturers began demanding transparent tracking from mines to assembly plants. The Ford scandal demonstrated how a single defect could ripple across production lines and global markets, shaking confidence everywhere. The industry did not merely react, it evolved. Ford's downfall became a blueprint of what to avoid and a catalyst for stronger standards across the automotive landscape. But the biggest ripple was not industrial, it was political. The political shockwave. The Ford scandal reshaped the fight over America's automotive future. Legislators seized the moment, arguing that the country needed stronger protections to prevent another corporate failure of this scale. Committees proposed enhanced safety laws requiring deeper testing cycles, stricter documentation procedures, and mandatory reporting standards for defects that previously might have been dismissed or delayed. Electric vehicle subsidies became another battlefield. Some politicians used Ford's collapse to argue that federal support should reward companies that demonstrated genuine innovation and transparency, not those that stumbled through mismanagement. Others saw the scandal as proof that American manufacturing needed more robust incentives to compete with foreign electric producers, especially as China scaled aggressively into export markets. Tariff debates reignited with fresh energy. Critics claimed that imported vehicles benefited unfairly from stricter oversight applied only to American companies, while supporters argued that global competition should not excuse domestic negligence. The political narrative intensified as both sides wove Ford's failure into broader arguments about national identity, industrial resilience, and the technological race of the 21st century. Campaign strategists quickly recognized the scandal's power. Candidates framed it as evidence of weakened corporate responsibility, misplaced subsidies, or failing regulation, depending on their agenda. Ford's crisis became shorthand for everything from economic insecurity to the urgency of modernization, and investors had their own reckoning, Wall Street's new rules for corporate trust. After Ford, no company could hide behind glossy earnings reports again. Wall Street reevaluated its standards, recognizing that traditional financial metrics had failed to capture the depth of Ford's internal vulnerabilities. Investors began demanding transparency far beyond quarterly numbers. They wanted full disclosure of defect reports, warranty projections, supply chain risks, and long-term engineering commitments. If a company's foundations were unstable, they wanted to know before the collapse, not after. Analysts revised their models to factor in reputational exposure, regulatory penalties, and cultural integrity. Companies that previously skirted by on optimistic forecasts found themselves questioned more aggressively. Ford's implosion proved that a single safety scandal could evaporate billions in value, undermine global plans, and shatter consumer trust in a matter of months. Corporate accountability was rewritten. Boards implemented oversight committees focused solely on product safety and compliance culture. Firms expanded whistleblower protections, recognizing that silenced employees could signal undiscovered dangers. Hedge funds and pension managers shifted portfolios toward companies showing verifiable transparency rather than polished public relations campaigns. Ford became the cautionary tale that defined a new era of investor behavior. The market now punished opacity as harshly as poor performance, and companies that ignored early warning signs faced immediate consequences. And for American consumers, the meaning was even bigger. What Ford's collapse means for every American. This was not just Ford's fall, it was a warning to the country. The collapse reshaped car prices, job markets, and expectations for corporate responsibility. As Ford's production slowed, supply chains across the Midwest weakened. Communities built around manufacturing plants faced uncertainty, and workers braced for layoffs that could ripple through local economies. Insurance companies adjusted premiums to account for heightened defect risks, and lenders revised loan criteria for brands deemed unstable. For consumers, trust became more valuable than horsepower. Families weighing their next purchase scrutinized safety ratings, defect histories, warranty provisions, and executive accountability. The days of buying a vehicle based solely on tradition or brand pride were over. Americans realized that a company's internal culture could directly affect their safety on the road. Nationally, Ford's collapse raised questions about America's competitiveness in the global automotive arena. If one of the nation's oldest manufacturers could falter so dramatically, what did that mean for the country's ability to lead the next generation of transportation technology? The scandal forced policymakers, investors, and consumers to confront an uncomfortable truth. Innovation without integrity is a fragile foundation. Ford's story became a lesson for every industry, every household, and every political leader. It showed what happens when transparency erodes, when warnings go unheeded, and when companies forget the people they serve. It exposed the cost of cutting corners, the danger of silencing engineers, and the collapse that follows when trust, integrity, and accountability are treated as optional. Ford's downfall echoed across boardrooms, factory floors, and government halls, reminding America that safety, honesty, and responsibility are not slogans, they are foundations. And when those foundations crack, the entire structure, from workers to consumers, eventually pays the price in the end. And that brings us to the end of today's breakdown. If you found these insights helpful, go ahead and hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts or questions, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. Your engagement keeps this channel growing and helps us reveal the truth behind the cars worth owning. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay smart, and I'll see you in the next one.